lives change. The change in human life has been extraordinary. Why are we feeling confused? Because it's changing so fast. And so this change that's happening all around the world is wild. But here's our concern now. When we look out, when we go to the edge, this edge of the abyss, and we look out into the unknown, and the reality is that we really don't know what it looks like. We know this change has put these kind of challenges on people's shoulders, but what's it going to look like? We don't know. So then we're stuck with this next question. Well, then what do we do about it today? What do you and I do about this incredible amount of change that brings with it this unknown? How do we respond? Here's the beautiful part. We don't know what's coming. Honestly, the best experts in the world don't know. So then what's the answer? Find a way to unlock our brains. We find a way to be the ones who are ready to look into that abyss, who are ready to stand on that edge, on that frontier, and keep looking, keep thinking, keep figuring it out. We need people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and find a way through. And that's what starts to shape our experience. This 4-letter word that drives all of us crazy. This 4-letter word called work. And what separates us from every other animal in the world is the fact that we can do it. I started to get fascinated with this word work. Because it's true, about 100,000 years ago, we discovered this thing, and no other animal has figured it out, that we could specialize our skills, trade those skills with somebody else, and through that, we can start to shape our experience. Every other animal wakes up every day and survives. What do? We build a better world. And it happens through this idea of work. It's such a powerful concept. Yet at the same time, I study it. I know what comes with it. I know the highs, I know the lows, I know the frustrations, but I also know the power. And I know the promise that through this hard work that's been proven over the last 115 years of this city, we can build a better world. And it happens layer after layer, person after person who leans into this abyss and says, I'm ready to roll up my sleeves. Now, in fairness, I started to get fascinated about this word work through a fear of work. Because I recognized that over the scope of my 40 years, I'd have 10,000 days of it. I'd work for 80,000 hours just like you. And what would it come to? What would it mean? And so I started to be aware that the dreams that I had could go down one of two paths. I could feel stuck in a desk, feeling like this thing that I'm going to do every day is actually getting in the way of my dreams, or it's unlocking them. And about 15 years ago, I was starting to discover that there were these two groups of people that were forming. Those who did feel like it built their dreams, and those who felt like work, the thing that unifies people all around the world, was getting in the way. And I was trying to get to the bottom of why that was happening. Because what was becoming clear as I was searching into this world of work was that things were changing. Humans discovered this thing called work about 100,000 years ago. And work for that entire length of time was about one thing: food. We worked at producing food for 100,000 years, and then all of a sudden we get so good at producing food that in 1900, after 100,000 years, we can start to shape a new kind of work. We can start to, instead of producing food, produce things. And it was this rapid transformation of lives. In fact, in every country in the world, up until 1900, the majority of people in every single country produced food. And then it changes. 1900, we start to produce all sorts of new things. 1950, a new change comes. Now we're getting so good at producing things, we need people who sell those things, market those things, strategize about those things, and a new kind of work transforms. Overnight, again, lives change. Lives changed. 100,000 years of very little change, 100 years, two big ones. And at the same time this is happening, we'd been using a few different technologies to help us do our work. And what happens in 1970, 1980? another big change. The technology of our world changes. And in the last 100 years, the change in human life has been extraordinary. We were good at this thing called farming, but the life that's required from this kind of work, we're all still figuring it out. So I went back to that question of why are we feeling confused? Because it's changing so fast. The world of work right now is wild. People are still searching for the first answer to the first challenge of work. How do you find it? So this change around the world looks like 4 things, and the first thing is how do you find it? Number 2 is, can you engage in it? Can you give it your heart? Can you give it your mind? Can you give it your best? I had a chance to have a conference with some people who work in southern Italy, and let me give you a sense of what that day looked like. It's on an ancient fig orchard, surrounded by thousands of trees. It looks like a resort. It is a resort. Pools, beautiful hotel. In the middle of this day, this conference, they were disappointed because their lunch was only 2 hours that day. And every other day, it's 3 hours. Because every other day, they get to go home and eat with their family. And this is the life that they protect. And so all through this conversation, we're getting into the philosophy of work, the engagement of work, the meaning of work. And then at the very end, they said, let me ask you the real question. The real question of why we brought you here. We get that we've protected a great life. But here's our concern now. Are we staying relevant? Or are we falling behind? And so this change that's happening all around the world looks like 3 things. Can you find your work? Can you engage in it? And can you stay relevant in it? So what's the 4th? Come with me to South Korea. We were there on a day on a 17th floor of an apartment building, and we looked down on this 32-lane intersection, 32 lanes. That was where we lived while we were in South Korea. And one day, it was so quiet. Nobody on the roads, and I had no idea what was going on. Well, later on, I get an article that comes through, and it says, this is the national exam day. I didn't know what that meant. What it means is that this is the day that high school students write their entrance exams for post-secondary. So why was the intersection shut down that day? Because the stock market's also shut down. Construction's shut down. Airplanes are rerouted. And what we find is that all of this pressure on these students is extraordinary. Yes, it's created this economic success story, but South Korea at the same time has the highest depression rate of all of the OECD, highest suicide rate, highest alcohol consumption. And so the 4th challenge of work started to be presented to us. If you can find it, and if you can engage in it, and if you can stay relevant in it, the 4th challenge is, can you stay healthy? And what I'm offering you today is a glimpse inside tomorrow's world of work that's dominated by 4 challenges. In fact, when we look out, when we go to the edge, this edge of the abyss, and we look out into the unknown, and the reality is that we really don't know what it looks like. We know these 4 pressures exist. We know this change has put these kind of challenges on people's shoulders, but what's it going to look like? We don't know. So then we're stuck with this next question. Well, then what do we do about it today? What do you and I do about this incredible amount of change that brings with it this unknown? How do we respond? Here's the beautiful part. We don't know what's coming. Honestly, the best experts in the world don't know. So then what's the answer? It's this. We find a way to unlock our brains. We find a way to be the ones who are ready to look into that abyss, who are ready to stand on that edge, on that frontier, and keep looking, keep thinking, keep figuring it out. We need people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and find a way through. To unlock your life's work, to deal with the change, to deal with the challenge, there's an important idea, and there's 3 rules. Here's the idea. A little while ago, I was in China, and there's this set of mountains called Huangshan. And it's a beautiful set of mountains. It's got these peaks that poke out through the clouds like fingers. And you can climb this mountain. And so I take off on this journey, and we're climbing this mountain, and the whole way up, you're passing people who look like this. carrying this kind of unusual load on this unusual system. They've got a bamboo pole that's about the height of me, and it's cut vertically from top to bottom, so it looks like a crescent moon, and they pick it up on their shoulders, hang 2 ropes on each side with a bundle of goods. Up this mountain is 4,000 stairs. By the time you're halfway up, you're all looking at each other, you recognize the grind that you're on, and so you develop these relationships with the people who are around you. And at one point, he puts down his load, and I asked him, how much does that weigh? He says 60 or 70 kilos. Kilos? Yeah. I think, is he seriously walking up 4,000 steps with that kind of weight? So I asked him, can I try? So he kind of looks at me. We're about the same size. He kind of chuckles and says, sure. So I get underneath this bar, and I pick it up, and sure enough, it's 135 pounds, give or take. And I try to take a few steps up the stairs, and I literally just about fall to my knees because the ropes start to swing. And at first, the first impression is, oh my gosh. I mean, when we think about work, hard work, start to see it through the lens of 135 pounds up 4,000 stairs every day. Gives new meaning to the word grind. But then I get to the top and I see a different man. And unfortunately, this isn't the actual picture of him. But he was carrying a load that dwarfed everyone else's. And he did it with a totally different outfit and a totally different look in his eye. And it was extraordinary to see. I just passed dozens of these guys walking up the stairs, and I get to the top, and there's a guy carrying a load that's much bigger, in spandex, with a look on his eye, and he started to identify to me what I started to see all around the world. That how do we unlock our life's work? Through a very important idea. And the idea is this, that your life's work, the thing that you get to decide you do for 10,000 days, and your job, they're not the same thing. You see, he had the same job as everybody else climbing that mountain. But he determined his life work differently than everyone else who was making that climb. He decided it for himself. He saw himself as an opportunity to drive his own performance, to treat this experience differently as he defined it. And so what we find is that those who truly uncover their life's work recognize that it's not their job. And it aligns to this thing that you get to do, this gift that you get to give the world for 10,000 days. But they're not the same thing. In fact, within that job, you get to define it the way that it fits for you. And that's the idea, that those who can manage the gauntlet of change, those who can handle what the world is throwing at them, recognize that they have a job and their life's work, and the two need to work together. You have this life's work that you get to declare, and within that life's work, it remains focused on one very important thing. It always remains human to human. Your life's work is best uncovered through the people who sit beside you, who get to smile at the end of the day and say, thanks for that work. I noticed it, I appreciated it, and it mattered to me. And those who uncover their life's work really treasure this opportunity between each other. So that's an important idea, that your life's work is for you to declare, and rule number 1 is that it stays human to human. What's rule number 2? That yes, it's about declaring it, and yes, it's human to human, but it's also about matching your highest ability to the deepest need as you define it. Rule number 3 of your life's work, yes, you get to declare it for yourself. Yes, it's human to human. Yes, it's your highest skills to the deepest need, but it gets measured in a way that we'll never know. I offered you a lot today. Lots of confusion, lots of change, and lots of a solution, and you get to determine what to do with it. You can choose to think yes or not. You can choose to open your perspective or not. It's your choice. This is your life's work. But before we end, I just want you to look all around you. I want you to really see your morning this morning. You woke up in a home that was heated, that had hot water, that allowed you to drive on roads to get to this building that truly is extraordinary. And all of this life, all of this city was built layer after layer, effort after effort by people just like you, that we may not know their name. but for 115 years have laid down this foundation. Those who step forward to the brink of this unknown abyss to look at things that the world had never seen, and they decided to roll up their sleeves and take on the hardest challenges the world had ever seen. And now it's our turn. And it happens through this 4-letter word, work. Your life's work. And I look forward to seeing how it continues to unfold for the community that I call home. And I thank you very much for all of your efforts and your time this morning. Thank you.